So what are we talking about today?
We're going to talk about old fashions and books from the 19th century.
What's going on, Average Joes? So after our last video of the borrowed bookcase tag, we decided that we wanted to do more of these and we needed to have some sort of theme to it. And while we both like to have some drinks and read some books, so we wanted to stick with the same theme. Other people commented on the last video saying that it was good, so we're going with booze and books. And starting off the first episode, it was your idea to go with the old-fashioned and expand some of these cocktails and to draw more comparisons and likeness to certain drinks and books. So much like what the tag had for historical fiction, we're going to go with old fashions for historical fictions. And today we're starting off. That was your first sip.
That was my first sip.
So what did you think?
It was good.
Yeah. So starting off, because I'm not going to say what time it is because we're drinking old fashions, but this is a cold brew old fashioned. They're fantastic. I'm going to have a video of me making them. It's similar to like a regular old fashioned, but it has cold brew in it. Typically, you'd want to have Mr. Black or something on a coffee liqueur, but where we live, we don't have access to those things. So I may do, but these things are phenomenal. I love them a lot, and the orange is very important with it. Also about old fashions, I only know briefness about old fashions in general, and how I got the coffee old fashioned recipe was from How to Drink. He's an awesome YouTube channel. I think I'll try and link his old fashioned video, which we just watched again before filming this. He's hilarious. He has great recipes and just really entertaining drinks. But old fashions came from about the mid to late 1800s, and they were people started drinking those because there was apparently cocktails back in the early 1800s, and then that developed into a house cocktail, and then that developed into people wanting to drink what the old school, the early 1800s drink was. So that is why it's been called an old fashioned. It has been adopted and changed a ton over time. A lot of bars will have their own rendition on it, their own spin on it. You'll get some really fancy ones now where they do these smoke domes over them, which are fantastic. Really awesome. I don't have one of those smoking domes yet, but I know some people that have had those. And yeah, there's all kinds of variations to it. It's definitely my favorite drink. What else you got on old fashions?
So the history is kind of convoluted, as in most cocktails. It seems like it was created with the bourbon version in Chicago in the late 1860s ish, and it was a big thing in gentlemen clubs around that time period, and those evolved from just your regular old fashioned into what you commented on about the different kind of cocktails and all the spin-offs and twists. The very earliest old fashions were actually made with gin. And that was in the earlier in the 1800s. So
yeah, and there's new modern renditions on it which muddle some fruit and make it way too sweet and all these different things. So it's definitely evolved. So that's the drink. Now getting into books, historical fiction. So we're going to do one historical fiction we like, one we either didn't like, disappointed in, or noteworthy in a negative sense, and then one we want to read, although we have multiple.
yes.
All right, so do you want to kick it off?
Sure. So as stated before in our last video, historical fiction is one of my favorite genres, and I have read so many from this era, actually. So the first one, I actually have two for this, because I have one that I read in high school that I absolutely loved. So that's The Great and Terrible Beauty by Libba Bray. It's a young adult book, but it has loss, friendship, mystery, magic. It was such a great book, and so different from the other historical fiction that I read, because those were the normal, everyday historical fiction, whereas this one was more of fantasy, and so it kind of had that little spin on it. And that was the first one I had ever read that was a fantasy back in that time period. So it was, I guess, the beginning of my love for this era. And then the second one I have is The Night Circus, which I read last year or the year before last, I can't remember. And it is also a great book. It's a fantastical fairy tale, and it's back in that time period, which obviously I love. And it's dark, very dark, and it has magical duels and mostly a love story, but everything that goes on in there kind of like yeah, but it overcasts the love story, the magical part of it.
All right, so the one I like, so I haven't read too many of these. I had to really search. At first, I didn't think I'd have enough books to talk about on this, and I really haven't read too many. I don't want to talk about Sebastian St. Cried because we talk about that all the time. But one that I have read that I do like is Great Train Robbery by Michael Crichton, one of the few non-sci-fi heavy Crichton books. It's actually the only Crichton book that I've read so far. But I love about this one because it's a heist. It's a train heist. It's really, really cool how he's done it, how he planned it out. I love Ocean's 11 and heists books and those types of things when, you know, there's a complex problem and a crew and there's twists at the end. And that's basically what this brings. And it is in the time period, it is in sometimes in the 1800s. I mean, it might be early 1800s as well. I'm not exactly sure. I forget. But I think it's the closest that I have for this. Yeah, it's a heist. It's smart. It's fun, and it's I think it's also it's actually based on a true story of a train robbery in the UK in that time period. So that is the only one that I have for liking. I have some other ones that I've been lukewarm about. I don't know. I think I'm starting to realize what it is about it. But I guess we can flow into the next portion, which is the books that we either didn't like or lukewarm about. Mine were like 3-star reads ish. 3.5, and I mean, I know I've talked about it a ton. Count of Monte Cristo is still, I mean, the fact that I've brought it up so many times and I'm still reading it after 3 months, it's like 3-star lukewarm to me. It's just because it just goes on and on about way too many things. I don't need to reiterate all of that stuff. I still like the premise behind the entire story. It's just too much side stuff. And the other one is the only other classic that I've read, and that's Dracula. And that's like a 3.5-star read for me. I did enjoy a lot about Dracula. I don't mind the journal entry formatting of the book. I actually like the journal entry type stories. I've read a few of those, and they're really, really cool. They're really interesting. But I think it has to do with the language and the formatting and the writing style of that time period. So the language that they use and the way they describe things, I just don't think I can connect with that. So I'm starting to realize that I really like this time period, but I like it from a modern day standpoint, wording of it. So I don't want to like the authors from back then, I'm sure they're great in their own right and they're inspired by other writers, but I'd rather get a modern wording and put it in a modern package than how they said things. Like how they talk in general, I know it's part of the time period, but just their prose and how they word the stories, I just can't connect with as well. And I know with Dracula, there were times where the language irked me a little bit. And like I said, this just goes on for a while. So I really like the time period, but I just don't know if I could connect with books that were actually written from that time period, from authors that lived then. I think I'd rather get modern authors who write about the time period that can phrase it in a way for my fragile little mind.
So for me, it was actually hard to come up with a book that I didn't like from this era. Because I actually do like authors from this era. I love Jane Austen. I love the classics. Like, those are definitely in my wheelhouse. So the book that I have that I was very lukewarm about was The Clockwork Angel. It's a trilogy.
Shadowhunters?
Yeah, kind of Shadowhunters, like
that before
the Shadowhunters trilogy.
Just milking that universe for
yes.
all it's worth.
So it's so similar to City of Bone, which is the main series. It has a cliche love triangle. So you have the good boy and the bad boy, and of course the girl is into the bad boy, and all of the fallout from that. It's slow. The story isn't super fast paced. It's a little bit hard to get through. It's entertaining, but it's not my favorite book.
It's one of those that's good for the people who love the universe, that just want to be
in the universe,
back into it, and just beef up, I guess, a little bit.
Yes.
They're just suckers for that.
Yes, but if you've read City of Bones and you kind of already have that in your mind, going back and reading this isn't really, I would say, ideal.
All right, so we just took a brief intermission to finish our drinks. It was a decent-sized intermission. We didn't just pound our drinks because I wanted to get the other types of old fashions. We had the cold brew old fashioned before. I have the classic old fashioned, which it's not quite classic. I used a different kind of bitters, a blood orange bitters. It's a little sweeter. It's just kind of nice every once in a while, but typically it's just with regular bitters. It's really simple. But yours, I made the gin old fashioned, which we just discovered that the old fashioned is inspired by around the 1800s. It was originally made with gin because that was more readily available. So I tried my first hand at a gin old fashioned, and your thoughts?
It's a little sweet for my taste, but I think with a little less sugar, it would be the perfect sipping drink. So
I put my homemade honey syrup in it, just 1-to-1 honey to water. And yeah, it's on the sweeter side, but I think it's delicious. It is fantastic. Way better than I thought it was going to be for a gin old fashioned. Because especially if you tell people that don't drink gin, a gin old fashioned, they could just be very juniper heavy. But anyway, that is our other old fashions. I wanted to get them out there to go with the episode. Now we're going to talk about books from that time period that we want to read.
Yes.
Now we both have two.
Yes. So I will start with...
This one sounds really cool.
The Strange Case of the Alchemist's Daughters. It is a mashup between Sherlock Holmes and Watson and the daughters of Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, Mr. Rappaccini, Frankenstein, and
Dr. Moreau.
Dr. Moreau. Basically, Mary Jekyll's parents are murdered, and they get together with Sherlock Holmes and try to figure out what
Sherlock's
happened.
actually in it?
Yes.
Oh, Jesus.
So I think it's going to be...
absurd,
It's going to be absurd, but
it's
it's going to be super entertaining, and I cannot wait to get to that book.
That does sound really, really interesting, really creative. Fun. It's one of those that I think you have to go in with an open mind and know that it's kind of ridiculous, but I think it'd be really fun.
Yeah.
So mine, it's funny because you sent me yesterday when you were looking at books, you said, "Oh, that one sounds good." I was like, "We own it." Jonathan Strange and Mission Norrell. This is another thick boy, but word count is actually not too bad. It's 800 pages, but the word count is like half of what other ones are. This has gotten mixed reviews throughout book two. Some people really like it. Other ones are just kind of like meh about it. I'm very interested. Like I said before, I really like this time period. This is early 1800s. I really like the time period, and it has mystery to do with magic. I guess magic was phased out, but now Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell came out and said that they actually can do magic. I'm not exactly sure what else happens in this story, but I think being in this world, I've heard the friendship and the dynamic between these two is really awesome, which really intrigues me of a lot of stories. Time period's fun. I'm probably going to want to drink whiskey while drinking this, honestly.
While reading it, you mean?
Yeah, not drinking it.
I don't think that'll go very well.
Drinking down the books, yeah. So it's definitely on the list. I kind of want to get to it this year, but with all the other thick books that I have going on, this is third on the list. I still have to finish Count of Monte Cristo anyway, but it sounds really cool, and it's also on your list now, apparently. So
yes, it is. See who gets to it first.
Yeah, I won't fight you for it.
My second one is The Paper Magician. It is an adventure of dark and whimsical magic. It's about a girl who is being trained in paper magic, which she feels is a lesser magic, and then she learns that it's actually not a lesser magic and that there's really awesome things she can do with it, and her teacher winds up getting hurt by somebody, and she has to go into his heart and learn his ways. And before
Into his heart?
yeah, I don't know how it works. That's what it said.
Is this like a
in the
Magic
book.
School Bus situation?
I don't know. I don't know how it works, but it sounds interesting. But it's supposed to be very dark and magical, and so I'm interested in like the different elements, because there's paper magic and there's metal magic, and so I think it'll be
It's like
really
a different twist on elemental.
Yes.
I remember seeing this because I put it on the list a long time ago. It did sound interesting, all the different types of magic, and it is on Kindle Unlimited, BT dub. Do you think like the writer was like interested in origami as a kid and they got made fun of it, and they're like, "I'll show you."
probably, because it sounds like they talk about making things with paper and that kind of stuff. So I feel like there's a good chance I think I can make a paper crane, and that's about it.
Or like the kid that made all the paper airplanes in class and was like way good at making paper airplanes, but it just wasn't that cool.
I don't know that making paper airplanes has ever been that cool.
See. All right, my next one. It's super easy to find murder mysteries in any time period. You can just like check that box and put it in. 7 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, not Evelyn Hugo. Different Evelyn.
No, definitely a different Evelyn.
This definitely sounds really awesome. Very Clue-like mystery, except I believe how this story progresses is that when Evelyn Hardcastle dies, there are 7 other people or however many other people in the room, and you are seeing the POV of each of these people, and then the pieces get put together for the murder mystery. I am very interested in this. It sounds really awesome and really fun. Yeah, I am all about this. I think you would be all about it as well.
Side note, you didn't even see Clue until last year, so I love how you say it's a Clue-like mystery.
Look, I'm a Clue expert now. I don't care. I know everything about clues, and there's Blue's Clues, and then there were None was one that's kind of like it, and then we watched Clue, and then right afterwards we watched Murder by Death or Death by Murder. I always get those backwards. Hilarious, both of them. Either way, they're phenomenal. Hey, I'm a Clue expert now. I don't know what you're talking about. So this is 1920s. So I kind of got both ends of the spectrum of what I want to read. We have other ones if I just really wanted to dig, but these are just ones that I know were on top, and that I look at this one all the time when I'm going up the stairs, and then that one sits behind me at my desk.
True.
But we definitely like the time period. I mean, we're watching Alienist right now.
Yes, which is also a book that is in that time period. In case you want to get into that, that's pretty.
Yeah, the show is really cool. Really dark mystery. It's better than most network shows because it was a network show. I don't know what network it was on, but it's definitely on the darker side, and I've been enjoying it. It's really cool. They've done well with it.
Oh, Queen of Hearts. I read that
was
one. It's pre Alice in Wonderland.
Like
and Alice in
prequel?
Wonderland. Yeah,
Origin
basically.
story?
Yeah. So it's the origin story of the Queen of Hearts.
Ah.
And Alice in Wonderland takes place in 1870s. So this is pre Alice in Wonderland, so it's in that time period.
You were lukewarm about it, I thought.
Yes. I haven't read the third one yet. I've read the first 2. So Sherlock Holmes takes place between 1870 and 1920.
Books that I've read would take place way after that. 1930s.
Because it's his daughter, right?
No.
Oh.
He's retired. He's like 60 or 70. And he finally gets married. It's his wife.
Oh, okay, his wife.
Mary.
Yeah. And then I've read some with his daughter.
Yep, we have 2 of those.
Yeah, and that's good. And then the Invisible Library is another one. I've read the first 4. You've only read 1.
Yeah. So say more about the Invisible Library. Because I know other people have brought it up. I've talked to 1 or 2 other booktubers on it that they wanted to pick it up. Those are the first 4, and I know there's more after that. I like the covers, and I like that we have them all matching. The first Invisible Library one, I was also lukewarm about. They were just, I didn't really connect with the characters or the plot, but if anything's over a trilogy long, then you kind of give the first book a little bit of leeway of they have to ease into things, and the dynamic between her and her rival lady, the other girl, seemed to get it more interesting, and there's another guy that
between her and her rival, it gets a lot more interesting, and even with the villain, who plays a bigger role in later books, and kind of grotesque in some ways, actually very grotesque in some ways. And then the relationship between her and her apprentice is kind of fluctuating, and you learn a little bit more about him and his, I can't give anything away, so him and his past and his people and that kind of stuff. And so it gets way more interesting the more you get into it. But if you don't read them close together, you kind of have to like read the summary from the last book before you get into the next book to kind of make sure that you know where they are and what's going on before you can get into that next book, because it picks up almost right where it leads off, and it just goes. And so you're like, wait, what happened? Why is this happening?
I think I also remember there being some sort of technology that they didn't know about that was creeping into one of the worlds.
Yes. So
Invisible Library is even though it is set in some time period, but it's
time period.
It's portal fantasy,
yes.
So it's going through all different kinds of parallel universes, right?
Right, right. So you have like future universes, and there's different doors in the library that takes you to different worlds, and those different worlds are in different time periods, and it's all interconnected but very different every world. So it's very interesting. It is interesting.
I think it's also why I liked Time Waves, which you read.
Yes.
And like that one was really cool because it takes place in the future, but they send you back in time to recover destroyed artifacts or whatever property that somebody pays you to do that. So they assimilate to the time period. You know, talk the talk, walk the walk, wear whatever. And the first book I loved because it did take place in the 1920s, and I think if I were to time travel, I feel like 1920s Paris, like that era that was, when there wasn't war going on, whenever those years were. It just sounded really fun because they just wake up, start drinking champagne, go to social events, wear fancy clothes, and then drink more, and that's like all they do is socialize. Like their job is just to socialize.
It's like the Sebastian St. Pride books where
you read books during the day.
They don't wake up until noon, and then they have breakfast, and then they make all their house calls, and then they have dinner, and then they go party all night.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wearing fancy things. Reading books during the day, that's all you do, that's all the entertainment you have, or you go to the theater, and then you go to after parties. Yeah, that sounds sweet. Oh, shit. I have read another one. Jacob Tracy. I gave it to your mom.
Of course you did. Before I read it.
She never read it.
Does that a lot.
Well,
and then she doesn't read it, so it doesn't even matter.
Yeah, I mean, you don't read them either. So, like, you have so many other ones
There
to
were
read.
2 books you gave to my mom that you were like, oh, you'd really like this one, but I'm going to let your mom read it first, and I have never read them.
She still has them.
And she
Either
probably
way,
hasn't read them.
The Curse of Jacob Casey, something like that. It takes place in the 1800s. It might be even late 17s, but I'm pretty sure it's in the 1800s because it was when the Wild West was going on. And he essentially sees dead people. Not to be too cliche, but yeah, they run into these crazy situations. He has a connection with the paranormal, and anywhere he goes, paranormal activities just starts to happen. He's like the OG Ghostbuster.
The OG Ghostbuster.
Man, Wild West Ghostbuster. Yeah, I totally forgot about that one. It was really cool because the book itself is a decent length and really small print, but there's like 3 individual stories within that same book and an arc to it. And there is a sequel to it, and I would be interested to read on because it was pretty cool how certain paranormal activities he interacts with. There's like a ghost in the first one, some sort of off-breed lycanthrope in the second one, and I forgot the third one, but there's still an overarching narrative, and he meets a lady that can kind of help him because he wants to lift his curse that he can see all these dead things and paranormal activity. So we got on to talking about all kinds of stuff and off on tangents that I had to cut out, but I also forgot to do a proper outro. So if you have any type of old-fashioned or history books that you want to talk about, let's leave them in the comments. What is one that, and from that time period, that you like? What is one that you were lukewarm about, disappointed in, or whatever? And what's one that you want to read from that time period? Do you like that time period? Do you like old fashions? Whatever it is, leave it down in the comments and we can chat about it more there. And I hope you like these episodes of Booze and Books because we want to keep doing more of them. and we have plans to do some more as well.